Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Marcus woke up early that Saturday with a smile he hadn't worn in a long time. 40 had arrived, and unlike what he'd imagined a decade earlier, he felt at peace with his age. He had 2 amazing kids, a steady job, a comfortable home, and a woman with whom he'd shared nearly 20 years of history. It was barbecue day, and this ritual never failed. Neighbors, old high school buddies, a few relatives, and even the parents of his kids' friends were all coming over. The grill was already set up, and Drew and Spencer had arranged the tables and chairs in the backyard. Jillian, as always, was handling the details: clean tablecloths, sodas in the cooler, napkins neatly folded. Marcus watched her from a distance, feeling lucky. She was quieter than usual, but he chalked it up to exhaustion from the past few days. Nothing seemed out of place. Around 2 in the afternoon, guests started arriving. Background music played, kids ran around, and the smell of meat on the grill filled the whole house. Marcus received compliments on his seasoning, chatted with everyone, laughed loudly. He genuinely felt happy, as if he'd reached a rare moment of fullness. Jillian moved between groups, smiling and serving guests, but with a distant look in her eyes. Marcus noticed but figured it was just fatigue. She sometimes got like this when overwhelmed. Still, he walked over, made a silly joke, and pulled her close. She smiled, but it was a faraway smile, the kind someone gives when they're trying to seem present but are somewhere else entirely. He found it odd but didn't press further. Then an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of the house. It was a black sedan with tinted windows. Everyone looked over, curious, assuming another guest had arrived. A man in a light-colored suit stepped out, a briefcase under his arm. He walked straight toward Jillian. When she saw him, she froze. Marcus, confused, looked between the two, waiting for an explanation. The man pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Jillian took it, opened it, read quickly, then stared at the ground. Her face lost all color. Marcus took a step forward, but before he could say anything, she spun on her heels, went inside, and reappeared seconds later holding his car keys. She got in the car and drove off quickly, without looking back. The silence that followed was awkward. Guests tried to act like nothing had happened, but the tension was thick. Drew and Spencer exchanged confused glances, not understanding what was going on. A neighbor attempted to lighten the mood by offering more soda, but no one felt like eating or talking anymore. Marcus stood still for a few seconds, eyes fixed on the gate. Then he dropped the grill tongs, took off his apron, and walked over to the envelope lying on the ground. It was open, with a few loose pages inside. He picked it up and started reading silently, but 2 neighbors standing nearby, also curious, leaned in and read over his shoulder. At the top of the page, the heading jumped out: Subpoena, Oakland County Family Court. Further down, one line immediately stood out. Jillian Whitmore is summoned as a witness in the divorce proceedings between Garrett Holloway and Evelyn Holloway, due to an extramarital relationship with Mr. Holloway over the past several months. Marcus didn't need to say a word. One neighbor stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. The other just mumbled something and looked away. It was too late to pretend otherwise. Garrett's name was right there, printed clearly. Jillian had been named as the other party in a coworker's divorce. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion, it was official, stamped on court letterhead. Marcus closed the envelope slowly. He stared at the ground for a moment, then walked back inside. The grill was still going, but the party was over, for everyone. The neighbors were the first to leave. Then the relatives. Finally, his oldest friends patted Marcus on the shoulder and said goodbye with a look of pity he hated. Within minutes, the house was empty. Only he and his kids remained, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Spencer asked if everything was okay. Marcus didn't answer. He just said he needed to go inside, that he was going to rest for a bit. He went upstairs and locked the bedroom door. Lying there on the bed, he started remembering little things. Jillian's phone always face down. Deleted messages. Meetings that seemed to drag on too long. Mood swings. Shorter hugs. Kisses that tasted like obligation. It all began to make sense. This wasn't some sudden outburst or impulsive mistake. It had been building for months, maybe even years. He felt anger, shame, sadness. But above all, a sense of being ripped away from a reality he'd believed was solid. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He spent hours going through his wife's computer. Archived emails. Scattered messages. One name appeared more often than it should have, Garrett. A coworker, a friend of her former boss. Married. Father of 2 young kids. That was the man Jillian had been involved with. His name was on the subpoena because Garrett was being sued by his wife. And Jillian had been named as the person he'd been having an affair with. She'd have to testify. The next morning, Marcus called Jillian's office. She hadn't shown up. He called her best friend, she knew nothing. He tried his mother-in-law, but she seemed just as surprised. Jillian had vanished. She disappeared with his car, without a word. Drew and Spencer were restless but respected their father's silence. Marcus spent all Sunday trying to figure out what to do. Finally, he decided to call Garrett. He needed to hear it from him. Garrett answered. His voice was curt but not hostile. He denied it at first, tried to dodge the question, but Marcus cut straight to the point. He said he knew everything. Garrett sighed and admitted it. Said it was true, that they'd gotten involved, that it was a mistake. Said Jillian was sorry and didn't want to destroy their family. Marcus hung up without responding. He needed time to think, to get himself back together inside. On Monday, he told work he'd be taking a few days off. He spent the morning calling lawyers and figuring out next steps. In the afternoon, he took the kids out for a walk to clear his head. But inside, everything felt gray. The pain didn't come in shouts, it came in silence. An absence that slowly grew and filled everything. He still didn't know what he'd do, but he knew that after that Saturday, his life would never be the same. 3 days passed without any word from Jillian. No calls, no texts, no social media activity, not even a minimal explanation. Marcus swung between silence and urgency. He cared for the kids, answered whatever was necessary calmly, but deep down, he already understood that everything had changed. Drew and Spencer sensed it too but still avoided asking direct questions. Their father was present, but his presence felt like that of someone sifting through the rubble of a place that once had structure. On the 3rd night, while sorting through a pile of bills on the table, Marcus heard his phone buzz. It was a message notification. The sender, Jillian. His body tensed even before he opened it. He took a deep breath and read. I'm sorry. I don't know what I've done with my life. I never thought this could happen. I want to talk to you. Please forgive me, for our kids. He read it more than once. The words seemed hastily written, with poor punctuation. A mix of guilt and desperation. He stood there for a while. He didn't reply. He just flipped the phone face down, checked on the kids to make sure they were asleep, and then locked himself in his room. The message echoed in his mind like a persistent whisper. The next morning, Drew and Spencer went to spend the day with their maternal grandmother. Marcus needed time. He calmly told the boys he had some things to sort out. They left without asking questions. Around 3 in the afternoon, the sound of an approaching engine made Marcus step out of the kitchen. It was his car. Jillian had returned, driving the same vehicle she'd taken on the day of the party. She parked in front of the house, disheveled, hair hastily tied back, no makeup, her expression worn. When she walked through the front door, she was already crying. Marcus stood waiting, expressionless. She said his name, begging him to listen. She said the relationship with Garrett was over, that it had been a mistake, that she felt empty and lost, but that she still loved their family. She talked non-stop, stumbling over her words, as if trying to pour everything out before he cut her off. She said she couldn't stand being away from the kids, that she couldn't bear the thought of seeing them only on weekends. That she regretted every day she'd spent with that man, that she wished she could erase it all, go back, start over. Marcus listened, but his mind wasn't there anymore. Her words entered, but they didn't land in the same place they once would have. He watched her plead, and not for a second did he feel like hugging her. He'd already grieved in the days before. He'd already moved through the anger, the shock, the humiliation. Now it was just about making a decision. When she tried to move closer, he raised his hand in a restrained gesture and nodded toward the garage. Jillian hesitated but obeyed. She opened the door and saw the boxes. Clothes, personal items, documents, everything carefully packed. They were in the trunk of her car, the one she'd left behind days earlier. At the sight of it, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing loudly. She begged for another chance, saying she didn't want to lose her home, that he was the only man who truly knew her soul. Her crying grew so intense that she lost her balance and passed out. Marcus rushed over, gently held her head, and laid her down on the couch. He fetched water and tried to wake her. A few minutes later, she opened her eyes, dazed. He didn't say anything. He went back to the porch, opened a beer, and sat there. When Jillian got up, her face still wet, she walked over to him. She stood there, waiting for him to say something. He turned his head just enough to see her from the side. "You feeling better?" he asked calmly. She nodded. "Your car keys are on the table. Please leave." Jillian stood there for a few seconds, hoping he'd change his mind. Then she went inside, grabbed the keys, and walked out the same door she'd used to run away. This time, no shouting, no slamming doors, no neighbors watching from the street. Marcus went in and locked the door. The house was quiet now in a different way. Her absence, once unbearable, now made sense. It was the space he needed for real life to begin again. After the door closed and Jillian left, Marcus didn't let himself fall apart. He was tired of being the one who carried everything. He'd endured the silences, the disguised absences, the empty stares at the end of the day. Now everything was clear, out in the open, and even though it hurt, he knew he'd done what needed to be done. He went back to the living room, picked up the glass she'd left on the table, and washed the lunch dishes. Each plate cleaned felt like confirmation that he'd taken back control. The next day, he picked up the kids from their grandmother's. Drew got in the car and stayed quiet for a while before asking if their mom had come back home. Marcus firmly replied that she'd shown up but left again soon after. He told them she was okay and that they could keep seeing her whenever they wanted. Spencer, younger, asked if she'd been crying. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror and just nodded. He didn't lie or try to soften it. The boys deserved the truth, told plainly, without sugarcoating. In the days that followed, the household routine changed. Jillian used to manage everything, and now there were gaps everywhere. But Drew naturally started helping out. He gathered laundry, made coffee for himself and his brother, looked up recipes online to prepare basic meals. Spencer set up an improvised workshop in the backyard with some old tools that had been stored away for years. He started by fixing his own bike, then the neighbors, and soon kids from the street were showing up asking for help with brakes, seats, pedals. It was as if he'd found a refuge there, a space that helped him make sense of what he was going through. Marcus noticed and decided not to interfere. He watched from a distance and offered support when needed. Occasionally, he'd stop by the hardware store and bring back new parts for his son's workshop. For Drew, he bought a cookbook and said they'd pick one recipe a week to try together. It became a ritual. On Wednesdays, they'd sit at the table with ingredients laid out, experiment, mess up together, and laugh when the sauce turned out too salty or the pasta stayed raw inside. During this time, Marcus received a summons to testify in the legal case involving Garrett and his wife. Jillian's name appeared as the main witness. In court, she confirmed her involvement with Garrett, said she regretted it, explained it had started with lunchtime messages, conversations that seemed harmless at first but gradually took over. She stated she never imagined it would lead to the destruction of 2 marriages. Garrett tried to downplay what happened, but his wife's lawyers presented records, photos, and receipts. Jillian left the hearing with her eyes downcast, not greeting anyone. Marcus saw her from afar and simply walked away. Not long after, Jillian lost her job. The news spread quickly among co-workers. The scandal had blown up, and the company chose to cut ties. She moved in with her mother, into a small house on the outskirts of Pontiac. Her mother's health was already failing, requiring constant care. Jillian took over household duties, prepared meals, and managed her mother's medications. She tried a few temporary jobs but nothing permanent. She'd occasionally show up to see the kids, picking them up on Saturdays and returning them Sundays, always looking tired and quiet. She never brought up the past, only asked how school was going, what they were eating, if they were sleeping well. Over time, the boys adjusted to the new routine. Marcus made a point of keeping open communication with both of them. They talked about boundaries, feelings, and what they hoped for in the future. One Sunday, while watching a game on the couch, Drew turned to his father and said he was proud of him. Marcus just smiled and put his arm around his son's shoulders. That sentence meant more to him than any apology he'd waited to hear during all those years of marriage. Some friends started reaching out again, people who distanced themselves after the whole mess, maybe unsure how to act. They invited Marcus to events, barbecues, dinners. He went, but without rushing back into the social scene. He was more focused on rebuilding what he had at home. Instead of filling the void with distractions, he chose to tend to his inner world, his emotions, his self-worth. He even started running around the neighborhood again, something he'd done back in college. During one of his runs, he ran into an acquaintance who mentioned Garrett was trying to get back with his wife. The attempt had failed. Evelyn had moved to another state with the kids and filed for full custody. Garrett was now being sued for parental alienation and infidelity. Hearing this, Marcus felt no satisfaction. He only felt certain that the choice he'd made was the right one. One afternoon, returning home with Spencer, he found an envelope on the living room floor. Drew had left it there. It was a note from his ex-wife. She thanked him for letting her keep seeing the kids, said she felt ashamed but also grateful he hadn't kept her from being their mother. She wrote that if she could turn back time, she would have protected what they had instead of chasing something that only made sense in fantasy. Marcus tucked the note away without mentioning it to the kids. He knew late remorse couldn't undo anything, but it served as a reminder that in the end, everyone suffers when someone breaks their commitment to their own home. On an ordinary Saturday, Jillian showed up at the door to take the kids for lunch. It was part of the new routine now. She'd stop by, chat briefly with Marcus, the boys would leave, and they'd be back by evening. No arguments, no tension, but no intimacy either, just the essentials. This time, Marcus immediately noticed something different about her. Her posture, her gaze, the way she held her bag. She was thinner, with deeper lines on her face. Her hair, once always neat, was now tied back carelessly. Drew and Spencer noticed too but said nothing. They just got in the car, exchanged a few words, and drove off. Before leaving, Jillian turned for a moment and explained that the car belonged to a neighbor. She'd sold hers to pay for her mother's more expensive treatment, as her condition had worsened over recent weeks. She also mentioned she was working shifts at a local grocery store and taking care of the house all day. Marcus listened, nodded in response, and stood there watching the three of them drive away. He felt no anger. No pity. Just that cold realization that none of this had to happen. That night, when the kids came back, Drew mentioned their mom had cried in the car but tried to hide it. He said she was exhausted but still believed things would work out someday. Spencer stayed quiet the whole time. He just went upstairs and listened to music. Marcus avoided asking questions. He simply called them for dinner and let time sort out whatever each of them was feeling. The following week, while folding the kids' laundry, he found a note in the pocket of a pair of pants. It was from Jillian. She wrote that she knew how much she'd hurt everyone but that she still loved Marcus. That she dreamed, even silently, of a chance to start over. That she understood if he'd already moved on, but needed to say this at least once, even if it was too late. Marcus read it, carefully folded the paper, and tucked it into a drawer among other old papers. He felt no anger, no hope. He realized that after everything, forgiving her was necessary, but for himself. To live in peace. To move forward without carrying invisible chains. He no longer needed explanations or promises. Life had already given him the answers. Today, each of them walks their own path. Jillian lives with her mother, splitting her time between hospital visits and shifts at the store. Marcus rebuilt his routine with the kids, found stability at home, and learned to appreciate the silence after the storm. When they meet to exchange the boys, there's respect. Sometimes even a brief smile. But what once existed has faded with time and mistakes. The love she claims to still feel now faces a different man, more whole, less available. And if there's any lesson in all this, it's that broken trust isn't repaired with words, but with choices. And that forgiveness, no matter how necessary, doesn't require anyone to return to a place where they've already suffered too much. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.